Out of all the charitable organizations in the country, in the world, as far as I know, the Salvation Army has my highest respect of them all, because they take care of the people that other people won't bother with. And they ask no credit for it. You know, it's a magnificent, it's the best organization I know. Now, it is time for us to meet our special guest for tonight, a gentleman I am proud to call a good friend, the author, composer, and lyricist of Broadway's hit musical, The Music Man, Meredith Wilson.
My first public appearance, musically speaking, was in the bass drum section of a Salvation Army group. Well, I was 8 years old at the time, and I came walking down the main street of Mason City, Iowa. It was a bitter cold December. And there was this lassie with a tambourine, and there was this young cadet, a Salvation Army cadet with a cornet, and there was this bass drum, see, with that stick there. All I knew that there was this drum and there was this stick, and I was 8 years old, and I just let nature take its course.
And without that, there may have been no Music Man.
Well, it's always a possibility.
Well, here's the thing. Meredith composed the new Salvation Army theme song.
Brass band works because you can take it anywhere. If it was an orchestra, you couldn't take it outside in the rain because the violins would get wet. But brass instruments, you can take them anywhere, anytime. I have known them to freeze up, of course, when I was in Canada, so that the valves wouldn't work. But normally, it's very adaptable.
Churches have organs. Salvation Army citadels usually have brass bands. Or we'll have pianos and organs and all kinds of other music too, and guitars, and heavy metal Christian rock bands. And that's okay if you like that. We'll just take any form of music.
The Salvation Army was started in England in 1865. It came to America in 1880. William Booth, who was a member of the Methodist Church, a preacher in the Methodist Church, as a matter of fact, noticed that people were standing outside the churches and they weren't allowed in because they were paupers or they were scruffy or they didn't fit the requirements of the church. William Booth went off on his own to start. In tent meetings and so on, the Salvation Army, we're an organization that has a dual purpose. We have the purposes of spreading the gospel through ministry, and we have social work, and they go hand in hand according to Jesus.
Well, we are a charitable organization, but that's not our first identity. Our primary identity is to be a Protestant, evangelical Christian church. Following on strongly behind that identity is a calling under God to reach out to those in special social need. All of that is motivated by our love for the Lord Jesus Christ.
There's a strong tradition of brass banding in the Salvation Army in Haiti. Now, sadly, there would be many more if there were more instruments. That's a big problem. In fact, some of the bands may have 35 members and only 15 instruments. So the band of 35 will be seated, and half of them will play that first song, then they'll pass the instrument to the next person who will play the second song. And the third song, they pass it back. and they're playing their horns all the time. I mean, all the time. Let me tell you, 7 o'clock on Saturday morning when I'm trying to sleep, they're playing their horns. It's a great thing. Since the earthquake, you would think that everybody would sort of just be in despair and stop doing what they've been doing. No, 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 no. Not the brass players. The brass players are out there, they're practicing, they're learning to play a horn. What's not good about learning to play a horn?
The first Salvation Army band are 4 men in a place called Salisbury, the Fry brothers. The father and 3 sons, they were Methodist people, and they saw the Salvation Army officers, who were 2 ladies, having a very rough time in open air meetings. So they went along really as bodyguards, took their instruments with them, and it became so popular that they just kept playing.
Salvation Army music has played a huge role in the Salvation Army from its inception, because you could go into the streets with a small group of musicians and attract people's attention, and they would come to you and find out what you're doing, and we could tell our message of Jesus Christ to these people. So music was really one of the initial ways to get people to hear our message.
You cannot separate the Salvation Army and music. The Army has been using music as an evangelical tool ever since its inception. Music reaches into the depths of the human heart, often in ways that other things will not. It will touch chords in a person that speaking or reading sometimes will not do.
My mother was born here in Harlem, New York, and my father raised in the Bronx, but they met here in Harlem going to the same church. My father, beginning, I was 5 years old, put a cornet in my hand. I went from a little toy one I used to play with. I used to sit in the front row of the church and play along with the band, a little toy one. Then one day I got a certain age, he said, okay, you can try the real one.
My grandfather was a tuba player in the Salvation Army. My father was a tuba player in the Salvation Army, and I broke the mold and did not play tuba. I started on the cornet, and at my ripe old age now, I still play the cornet.
Up until high school, I went to be a professional basketball player. But I think I made a turn in high school when I met my high school band director.
When I was in high school, there were just 2 things that interested me. One was rugby, and one was music. And I remember getting a report card one time from school, and I probably still have it tucked away somewhere. Gordon should concentrate on his rugby and forget about his music. Well, I guess if I was a rugby player, I'd be long retired by now. So I didn't have much of a choice. Actually, if I show you my lower teeth, there's still a little chip there from a rugby game. And I wasn't able to play my instrument for a few weeks, and my father was furious.
I had auditioned for some schools, and the one I really wanted to get into was Manhattan School of Music, and I got in. So I walked in, and I saw the Philharmonic trumpet section auditioning me. So I was like, oh boy, okay, now I'm really, okay, get it together, get it together. So when they saw something in me they were like, okay, you got in, and I believe it was over 100 trumpet players showed up, and they only accepted 2, and I was one of the 2.
Each of my children have played an instrument and still do, I guess, all of them now. And some, again, we sort of forced into practice. You must practice, and I guess that's something that every family has to put up with when parents tell the children, you must practice, you must do this. But now you can probably, in retrospect, think, well, that was maybe a good thing that I pushed them at that point.
You'll get that stars in the morning.
A position that was offered was Director of Music for the Salvation Army in New York. Looking after music in various centers of the Salvation Army, planning summer music camps out at the Starlight Music Camp, which the Salvation Army owns in New Jersey.
my personal conviction is playing for God is the most important thing in my life. So, and from that, I've been blessed to do other things. I started playing at this church, going back and forth from Harlem Temple here, the Salvation Army, and the band there was an all-star band. They were everybody had resumes, you know, and the leader, he was the man. So one day he called me for a studio session to play for a gospel artist, Donnie McClurkin's album. But after that, he's like, "Oh, you want to do Mary J. Blige's album?" I was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah." So sure enough, yeah, I want to do that album. It was called My Life, and so she heard it say, "I'm going on tour." And I said, "Me?" I said, "I'm there." So that's what happened. And from then on, after that, Mary happened. And then from Mary, I was able to parlay that next thing into Beyonce. Everything steamrolls from this. Something bigger will happen because of all the people that I'm meeting. One thing went from another thing to another thing to another thing, just from off of being in the right place at the right time. Initially, the first time was I was in the right place at the right time playing at that church.
We had an officer at the Corps that I used to go to, who every Sunday, it seemed to me, it probably wasn't so, it seemed every Sunday, we would sing a song by Sidney Cox, "Follow thou me, he calls again, and I will make you fishers of men. As in the days by Galilee, Jesus is calling you and me." And I think, oh, it's okay. But almost every Sunday, as we sang it, he would look at me, and we come to that line, he's calling you and me. And I thought, well, it's all right for the you, but for me, it's a different story. But eventually I could resist no longer and became a cadet in the training college.
My grandfather was the son of a tavern owner in Holland, and he saw the Salvation Army on the street. The Salvation Army band was doing an open air, which is what we do. We go out and we tell the gospel of Jesus on the street. He saw this, he was attracted, he went to the Salvation Army, he got involved with the band, and then his parents found out, the tavern owners, and they were furious with him. So they locked him in an attic of this tavern in Holland, and they kept him captive up there and wouldn't let him go to the Salvation Army. Well, one day the Salvation Army band came marching by the tavern, and my grandfather threw a note out the window, "Help, I'm being held captive." And the police came, released him. He eventually moved to America, where my mother was born.
In New York, it's unique because there are so many personalities around that sometimes you tend to forget, but a couple of the Christmas events where we met, chatted with Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. We had a kettle kickoff for the Salvation Army where we had Yogi Berra there as the guest. We've done events with President Clinton where he donated his time actually, and the Salvation Army raised quite a bit of money that evening. There were a number of celebrities there, and we did a thing at Carnegie Hall with Elton John singing, and Sting was performing on the same program, so they were just stood listening. So I decided to bring up the good English topic of football, which they're both involved in, and then we got into a conversation there. And we did a movie with Denzel Washington and Whitney Houston and spent all night filming The Preacher's Wife, and we're in the distance there. One of them recently was a movie called Serendipity, and if you watch that movie, the opening scene, you'll see a Salvation Army group right outside of Bloomingdale's. So the Salvation Army is represented well in a number of movies, and they're always fun to do. I play in a group called the New York Staff Band, which I have done since 1981, which is a group of Salvationist musicians from around the area that come together once a week to rehearse. I also play in my local Salvation Army band in Hempstead, which is a church band.
I'm the world leader of the Salvation Army. The general is elected to lead the army. I really wanted to be a lawyer, embarked upon a legal career. I was married to Helen by then. During that time, it became clear to us both that what we were doing was not what we would do all our lives. We were graciously received into the Salvation Army Officer Training College in London, England. Whatever the Army wants us to do, wherever the Army will send us, we'll salute and go because we trust in God. And that has led us into taking responsibilities in the Salvation Army on 5 different continents.
Every gig I get is a blessing. It's not everybody gets to work as much as I do. There's a lot of professional musicians that are sitting at home, not busy. That's it's not a good thing to be a professional musician and sitting at home. As a musician, it's always a certain way. You have your busy periods and your times when it gets slow.
I think as a Christian, we have to believe that music is a gift from God and that it is something that is good. And if you can be involved in music and your church, combine the two, that's also a good thing. Music is good therapy for me. I think it is for a lot of people, but when things are going rough in your life and not the way you would want them to be, and that's happened in our family, a lot of health issues that have been very serious, that being a Christian and a Christian musician doesn't mean that things are not going to happen that are not good in your life. Those things are going to happen whether you're a Christian or not, but just to know that you have a higher power to help you through these things and that you don't do all these things just by yourselves because they can be totally overwhelming. Being a musician as well helps because that can be therapy. It can take you to a whole new other level in the times when things are really getting on top in your life.
When we talk about music, we're dealing with something that's very mysterious because nobody can tell us what is happening or the mechanics or the science of what happens inside me in the world of my emotions when I hear a great symphony of Sibelius or something like that, or a beautiful, moving piece of Salvation Army brass music, or a stirring brass band march. And when I march down a high street with a Salvation Army band at my back and the Salvation Army flag flying in front of me, I just feel that I'm alive. It's a great feeling.
I pulled out Bibles on gigs, and where it's not the most popular thing to do on certain things when you're on hip-hop tour, all types of craziness going on. But once I saw Mary and I talked with her about the Bible, I was blown away. It's just a talk. It's a normal talk about certain things. She asked me about the trumpet and, breathing. We had it was a nice, cool conversation.
I like playing an instrument because it's really fun and it helps me with my piano also, playing a brass instrument, and it helps my ear, so it helps with my singing. Being a musician is so much fun.
I started coming here to the Salvation Army when I was 2, and I started playing 5 years ago or so. The cornet is a fun instrument to play, and when I first started I didn't really like it, but then as years progressed I got better at it.
Okay, so you got to grasp the style right away of this waltz thing. And then it becomes real easy for whoever's playing the melody.
Music's great for young people because it's a discipline, and it teaches so much more than actual notes on a page. It's the discipline of learning music, as the discipline of any other thing like that is immense, and it can teach values that young people keep for the rest of their lives, whether they become professional musicians or not. That's not our aim, but music's something that is generational as well. Yeah, an 80-year-old can be sat next to an 18-year-old and feel totally comfortable about that. There's not many things that can happen, so that happens in the Salvation Army, and I think it's a good thing.
It's a success happen with many artists, but it's always credited to what I learned from my father, the Salvation Army, and most importantly, God who gave me the opportunity, and my mother who encouraged me the most.
I think it's very rewarding, very satisfying to be part of a group all pursuing the same goal, not to show off, but just to achieve harmony, togetherness, excellence, in pursuit of the highest cause in all the world, the cause of Jesus Christ.
Should you love the unloved, never reckoning the cost, giving them comfort and care? Should you seek the unloved in the legion of the lost, sharing their grief and despair? That's the creed of an army, a God-fearing army, with banners and bonnets and cars. The unloved in the spirit of the Lord, walking with trumpets and blood, with banners and bonnets they call.